He showed up early, wore a tailored suit, smiled as he gave his name. But the receptionist leaned back, tapped her keyboard, and said, "There's no record, you'll need to step aside." What she didn't know, he wasn't there for a meeting. He was the CEO about to sign a $200 million deal with her company. So tell me, when the door doesn't open, is it broken, or is it being guarded? Before we dive into the story, don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us and inspires us to create even more engaging content. Thank you. It was one of those spring mornings when the air still carried a hint of winter. But the light was already changing, brighter, cleaner. Darren Wells adjusted his collar as he stepped out of the car. The building loomed ahead, all glass and confidence. Helios Systems. Their name was etched in polished stone beside the door, as if permanence could be carved. He had been here once before, years ago, in a different role, far removed from the kind of man who now returned as the founder of Skyvault Innovations, one of the most talked about tech firms on the East Coast. Today wasn't for pomp or photos, just a quiet pre-meeting walkthrough before finalizing a $200 million partnership. He'd requested no escort, just wanted to observe, listen to how people moved, how they worked. The receptionist's desk sat at the center of the lobby like a podium. Behind it, a young woman with a sleek ponytail and a blazer too stiff for comfort typed something quickly, glancing up only when Darren stood directly in front of her. "Good morning," he said, offering a gentle smile. "I have a scheduled tour with facilities before the executive meeting." She paused. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard, then tapped again. "Name? Darren Wells." The pause grew longer. She typed again, then frowned. "Nothing under Wells." He pulled out a neatly folded printout, the kind you brought when you knew technology could be used as an excuse. "This is the confirmation, sent from Amanda Whitaker's office yesterday morning. Should be listed under Skyvault Innovations." She scanned the page briefly, then looked up, her voice lowered, not in apology, but in judgment. "Anyone can type up a confirmation. It's not in the system." Darren blinked slowly, not surprised, just tired. "I can wait here while you double-check with Amanda's team." She stood her ground. "That's not how we do things. No name, no badge. I'm asking you to step aside." Behind them, the rhythm of the office went on, elevators dinging, shoes tapping on marble, someone laughing too loudly into a headset. But near the desk, the air changed. A few heads turned, not many. A man in a blue Helios polo shirt looked up from the corner, his eyes settling briefly on Darren, then away again. Darren recognized him from LinkedIn. Marcus Jensen, junior systems analyst, bright kid, quick, and now, quiet. "I can call Amanda myself if that helps," Darren offered calmly. The receptionist smiled, sharp and clipped. "I think you've done enough, sir." At that moment, a tall man in a tailored gray suit strolled by, phone pressed to his ear. Edward Grant, Vice President of Operations. He glanced up, saw Darren, and without so much as a nod, pivoted mid-step and kept walking. The timing was too precise to be accidental. Darren turned back to the receptionist. "You recognized me the second I walked up, didn't you?" She didn't answer, just kept typing something that didn't matter. He exhaled, once, then nodded, folded the printout, and tucked it back into his coat. "Thank you for your time," he said quietly. As he walked out, someone behind the desk whispered something. Someone else laughed, just a chuckle, the kind that wasn't aimed directly at you, but you knew it was meant for you all the same. Outside, the wind picked up again. Darren paused at the car door, looking back through the glass where the receptionist was already turned to greet someone else, someone with lighter skin, lighter hair, and a visible name badge ready in hand. He didn't slam the door when he got in. He didn't call his assistant. He just sat for a moment, fingers curled loosely around the steering wheel. Sometimes, injustice didn't arrive with shouting or slurs. Sometimes it wore a blazer and a polished smile. Sometimes it typed your name and pretended not to find it. Inside, Marcus Jensen watched from his desk. And this time, he didn't look away. Darren didn't drive away. Not immediately. The car sat in its spot, engine off. Windows rolled halfway down as a soft breeze slipped through. He watched people enter and leave the building like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just been dismissed, unseen, unacknowledged. Inside his blazer pocket, the phone buzzed softly. Amanda, his executive assistant, had just replied. Let me know how it goes. They've been quiet on the documents. But we're ready if you are. He stared at the screen. Then opened the original email. A formal confirmation from Helios. Timestamped at 9:42 a.m. the day before. There was the signature, Edward Grant's assistant. Digital watermark and all. Clean, professional, unmistakable. He exhaled slowly, not with frustration, but something else, something heavier. A memory floated to the surface, not loud or dramatic. Just there, his mother, standing in front of a bank teller years ago, asking about a missing check. The teller barely glanced at her ID before saying, "You must be confused. That kind of deposit wouldn't be in your account." No eye contact, no explanation, just quiet rejection wrapped in policy. Darren had stood beside her, only 13 at the time. He remembered the way she folded the slip and said thank you anyway. As if she hadn't just been called a liar without a word. Some things stay. They settle in the chest and wait. Now, Darren tapped the phone off and stepped out of the car. This time, his walk back into the building was slower. Not because he hesitated, but because he wanted to give everyone a chance to see. Brooke looked up as he approached. Her fingers paused mid-type. I already told you. He held up the phone calmly. I just want you to see this. His voice was steady, even warmer than before. The email was clear. Internal address. Confirmed schedule. Attachments. Darren didn't speak further. He simply let her read. She took a breath, half a breath, and glanced at the screen before leaning back slightly. That's not a confirmation I can verify, she said. I don't have system access to check that. You don't need access, he replied. You just need to make a call. Her chin lifted. Sir, I don't make those kinds of calls without authorization. The system doesn't have your name. And I'm following protocol. He let the silence between them stretch. But she didn't fill it. Behind him, someone cleared their throat. A small sound, quickly swallowed. The lobby grew more aware, more alert. And then Edward arrived. This time, he didn't pretend to be on the phone. He came flanked by 2 uniformed building security guards. Their presence wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. Mr. Wells, Edward began, his tone professional, practiced. I've been informed there's been some confusion. But we do have procedures to follow. We're in the middle of a high security week with visitors. And I'm sure you understand that unverified arrivals can cause disruption. Darren turned to him, no anger in his eyes, just clarity. I wasn't unverified, he said. You received this email. Your assistant sent it. My name was on your agenda. Edward didn't blink. Our front desk doesn't reflect that. If something was missed, I'll have my team follow up. But in the moment, when I stood here, you chose to walk away. There was a flicker, barely noticeable. Edward's jaw tightened. I didn't recognize you. Darren tilted his head, just slightly. You recognized me. You chose not to see me. Edward gestured to security, not angrily, but with the same cool detachment he might use to adjust a table's centerpiece. We're asking that you return after we've clarified this internally. It's best for everyone, for professionalism. The word hung in the air like a curtain. Professionalism. It didn't mean truth. It meant comfort. Darren looked around. A few employees lingered near the corners. A woman with a badge glanced up, then away. Marcus, still at his desk, watched. His hands hovered over the keyboard, then curled slowly into his lap. His eyes met Darren's, just for a moment. Darren spoke one last time. The question isn't whether I had an appointment, he said. The question is whether, if I looked like someone else, you would have bothered to check. Edward saw nothing. Brooke didn't move. The guards waited for a nod that never came. Darren turned and walked out again, but not empty. Not this time. Not silent. The drive back to Skyvault's headquarters was quiet. Darren didn't turn on the radio. He didn't take any calls. The city passed by his windows in streaks of steel and sunlight. But his mind stayed rooted to that front desk, Brooke's voice. Edward's coldness. The quiet agreement of a lobby full of people who looked away. By the time he stepped off the elevator on the 15th floor, Eliza was already standing with a notepad in hand. She didn't need prompting. She'd seen the look on his face once before. The same day a competitor had tried to buy Skyvault out of desperation and disrespect. This morning didn't go how they planned, Darren said, setting his phone on the table. Or maybe it went exactly how they planned. Pull every email we've exchanged with Helios over the last 30 days. I want timestamps, attachments, digital signatures, everything. Eliza nodded and disappeared into the server room. Darren walked to the window. The skyline was wide, endless, but he couldn't help remembering something much smaller, a card catalog and a pale green library card. He must have been 8 or 9. His mother had taken him to the local library on a Saturday. They'd planned it all week. She even let him pick out which 2 books he wanted to check out. But when they arrived, the clerk behind the desk, a woman in a brown sweater with lipstick too red for her thin lips, had paused when she saw the card, said she couldn't find her in the system. No apology, no effort to look deeper. We've updated our records, she'd said, eyes never lifting. His mother had thanked her, gently folded the card, and walked them out with her back straight. But that night, he'd seen the way she held that card in her hands. Long after he'd gone to bed. Some erasures are louder than others. An hour later, Eliza returned. Everything was clean, just as expected. You were confirmed. Amanda sent the meeting request to Edward's office at 9:42 a.m. yesterday. His assistant replied at 9:59 with a full itinerary. It's all on record. Darren nodded slowly, absorbing it. Then he said one name. Marcus. Eliza paused, then smiled, just barely. He's still on their systems. Works in IT support. Quiet guy. Darren didn't hesitate. He opened his phone, scrolled through old contacts, and found it. Marcus Jensen. The kid had interned at Skyvault 2 summers ago. Bright, humble, the kind who triple-checked his code and stayed behind to clean up whiteboards when others rushed to lunch. He typed a short message. Hey Marcus, I believe you saw what happened this morning. I need help, not revenge, just truth. He hit send. Minutes passed. Then the reply came. Just a single line. Give me a minute. And then, 5 minutes later, a photo. A screenshot of the internal log. Subject. Visitor check-in. User. B. Taylor. Action. Deleted appointment record for Darren Wells at 8:03 a.m. Reason. Field left blank. Timestamp. 47 minutes before Darren had arrived. Below the image, Marcus had written another message. It was only 5 words. I can't stay silent anymore. Darren stared at the screen. Not in anger, not in triumph, but in something heavier. Relief, maybe, but the kind that sits on your chest, not your shoulders. Thank you, he typed back, and then he sat alone in his office. The city still humming outside, and let the silence stay. He wasn't smiling because he'd won anything. He was smiling because, for the first time today, someone had chosen not to look away. The morning air held a stillness that didn't feel natural. Inside Helios systems, the usually bustling chatter of Monday was muted, colder, tighter. Brooke Taylor sat at her desk in a new blazer, freshly pressed, hair pulled taut into a bun that dared anyone to question her confidence. But today, no one greeted her, no one even asked for help. They were reading, all across departments, from finance to facilities. The same email pinged inboxes just before 9 a.m. It was composed plainly, no flourish, no legal threats, just a question that burned quietly beneath the surface. Does a guest need to wear a white suit and arrive with a personal escort to be considered worthy of a welcome? Attached was a timestamp system log, showing the deletion of Darren Wells' scheduled meeting, executed at 8:03 a.m. by Brooke's account. The second attachment was a screenshot of the original meeting confirmation, signed by Edward Grant's assistant. The email had been sent to Helios' full executive team, CC'd to Skyvault, and a list of technology reporters whose Twitter followings could flatten a reputation in under an hour. But what shook people wasn't just the evidence, it was the tone. There was no rage, no insult, no begging, just disappointment so sharply written it left paper cuts. By 10:15, murmurs passed through the hallways like nervous prayers. A project manager lowered her voice near the break room. He's not just a guest. He was the deal. An HR associate stood near the printer. biting the inside of her cheek while scanning through the screenshots again. And at the front desk, Brooke kept typing, but her fingers weren't hitting anything that mattered. She felt the weight of glances brushing her skin like cold breath. When someone approached, she looked up with expectation, only to see them pull out a phone and point it quietly. Lens facing the desk. No one said anything. That silence used to be power. Now it felt like exposure. Downstairs, in the main conference room, a hastily convened department head meeting was underway. Tensions buzzed louder than the fluorescent lights above. Then the door opened. Darren stepped in, quiet as ever. He wore no suit, no entourage, just a simple navy jacket and the kind of stillness that filled every corner of the room without asking permission. The CEO of Helios Systems, a man named Randall Coyle, rose and extended his hand. Mr. Wells, I'm so sorry for. Darren nodded once, then turned toward the projection screen. With the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove, he connected his device and opened the file. No speech, no introduction. A single screenshot appeared. Appointment deletion log. Time: 8:03 a.m. User: btaylor@helios.com. Action: manual removal. Notes: none. He didn't say, "I told you so." He didn't ask for an apology. He simply stood back and let the room breathe. It didn't, until someone stood up. From the back of the room, a tall man in a blue polo, the kind usually worn by those who know every hallway but attend few meetings, rose to his feet. Ramon Torres, building services. For 7 years, he'd moved chairs, fixed printers, and replaced light bulbs no one noticed until they burned out. I've worked here long enough to know what that looked like, Ramon said. I saw her do it to someone last year, young guy. Delivery badge, said he had a meeting. She smiled and told him he must have mixed up buildings. Then she deleted the log. He paused. I didn't say anything then. Figured it wasn't my business. His eyes didn't waver. But it is now. A hush held the room. Then a clap. Just one. Then two. Slow. Unsure. But it spread. No cheering. No whistles. Just the sound of people remembering what it felt like to choose decency. Brooke wasn't in the room. But her name was. On the screen. On everyone's lips. In everyone's silence. Darren closed his laptop. I didn't come here to win, he said, voice even, just to be seen, and to ask, what kind of system do we have? If it only works when we fit its picture. He looked to Ramon. Thank you. And for the first time that week, someone nodded back without shame. It started with a blink. One of the reception monitors in the Helios Systems lobby flickered. Just for a moment, barely noticeable. But within the hour, what flickered had caught fire. The internal security footage wasn't supposed to be accessible. It wasn't something you could find by poking around a folder. But someone had found it. And someone had shared it. At first, it showed nothing unusual. Brooke at the front desk, straightening a stack of folders. Edward Grant approaching with his typical hurried stride. Coffee in one hand, phone in the other. He leaned in toward Brooke. Close enough that the microphone picked up just enough. His voice a whisper layered in authority. Make sure we're screening who walks through that door. Some faces don't align with our brand. You understand? Brooke's response wasn't words. It was the way she nodded. The way she smirked. The way she deleted a name from the screen before sipping her tea. The video was 37 seconds long. It didn't need to be longer. The clip hit Twitter first. A tech consultant who'd once interviewed at Helios but turned down the job shared it with the caption. Not a glitch. Not a misunderstanding. Just a door that only opens one way. It didn't take long. Within hours, hashtag open the lobby and hashtag who gets welcomed were trending across LinkedIn, Reddit, and even industry Slack channels. Former employees shared similar stories, moments they'd swallowed instead of spoken. Delivery drivers, guest speakers, young interns who'd walked away from careers before they'd even started. And then, a quiet notification blinked across every Helios inbox. Emergency board meeting 3 p.m. Mandatory. Darren didn't need an invitation. He was already on his way. When he arrived, the room was different. Not because Edward looked smaller in his seat, or because Brooke was absent. It was different because the silence had changed. It wasn't the kind that covered shame. It was the kind that made space for truth. The doors opened one final time, and in walked a woman no one expected. Linda Carver, co-founder of Helios. She'd been retired for 3 years, hadn't spoken publicly since her husband passed. But she was there now, hair silver and sharp, walking with a cane and a presence that bent the air around her. She said nothing for the first several minutes. Just listened. Darren spoke once, and only once. "Truth doesn't need to be loud to be undeniable," he said, placing the security footage still frame on the screen. "It doesn't need a microphone. It just needs a moment." Then he sat. Linda finally stood. Her eyes didn't blink. "When I started Helios," she said, "I believed in hiring brilliance, not building mirrors. What I see here today is a house that reflects itself, and forgets the street outside." She turned to Edward. "You've made this company smaller by pretending to protect it." No one clapped. No one needed to. The decision was swift. Edward Grant, indefinitely suspended pending investigation. Brooke Taylor, removed from the premises, with final pay issued. And just like that, the mask fell, not with a bang, but with the weight of 100 quiet nods that had waited too long. As the room began to thin, Darren walked over to Marcus Jensen. The young man looked like he hadn't slept, but he didn't look away. "Why now?" Darren asked. Marcus's voice was quiet. "Because I saw myself doing nothing, and I didn't like who that made me." Darren nodded, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then you saw exactly what you needed." He didn't stay for drinks. There were no drinks, no celebration, just a hallway emptying slowly, the way a building exhales after holding its breath too long. And somewhere, on a desk still warm with the shape of Brooke's elbows, a screen flashed black, and stayed that way. By morning, the building felt quieter, though it was anything but. The city hadn't even poured its second cup of coffee before the clip had been viewed over 4 million times. On Twitter, the hashtags #WhoGetsWelcomed and #OpenTheLobby sat side by side like mirrored questions. On LinkedIn, professionals recounted moments that once made them shrink into themselves, now rising to the surface with the safety of a crowd. And for the first time, people were listening. It wasn't just tech executives or HR directors. It was nurses in small-town clinics who remembered being mistaken for janitors. Young college grads turned away at interviews before word was spoken. Retired veterans passed over at service desks because their hands shook too much. The story wasn't about Darren Wells anymore. It was about everyone who had walked into a room built for welcome, and been quietly denied entrance by eyes that already decided. By 11 a.m., CNN had picked it up. By noon, Forbes had posted an op-ed titled, "Bias at the Front Desk. What Corporate America Must Learn from Skyvault's Stand." One outlet called it a tipping point. Another called it a reckoning. Helios Systems had no choice but to respond. A statement appeared on their website first, then across every social platform they operated. "We apologize to Mr. Darren Wells and the team at Skyvault Innovations. What happened does not represent the values we claim to uphold. It has become clear we need to look harder, not outward, but inward. Effective immediately, we are restructuring our guest reception policies, implementing mandatory training, and placing diversity accountability at the leadership level." But the words that mattered most didn't come from the PR team. They came from the CEO himself, standing at a podium in a modest press room with the same suit he'd worn the day the story broke. "I was silent," he said, looking not at the cameras, but down for a long moment before lifting his gaze again. "Not because I agreed, but because I didn't want the noise. And now I see that silence, my silence, was its own kind of noise. One that allowed others to speak louder with harm." He paused, breathing like someone unlearning how to speak. "We chose wrong, but we can choose again." The room held still, not with tension, but with possibility. Behind the scenes, the receptionist's desk had already been cleared. Brooke's name vanished from Helios's employee directory. Her LinkedIn account went dark. Her title erased as if she had never been there. But the memory remained, in still frames, retweets, and silent nods across break rooms in cities miles away. And then, there was Marcus, the young technician who once kept his head down, who knew the hum of server rooms better than the buzz of meetings. Now sat in a different chair, beside the head of our reviewing policy language for a new onboarding framework. He didn't speak often in those sessions. But when he did, people leaned in. Darren didn't attend the press conference. He declined interviews, awards, and even a podcast invitation from a publication he admired. Instead, he sat at his desk that evening, watching the sun dip below the San Francisco skyline, and wrote a single blog post on the company site. It was only 6 sentences long. But the final line stayed with everyone who read it. Not everyone who says sorry changes. But no change begins until someone stops staying silent. The post was shared by university deans, cashiers, pastors, and programmers. Some printed it and taped it beside coffee machines. Others saved it quietly, like a note to self. Change didn't come in waves that day. It came in small, still waters. In the way a new receptionist greeted the janitor by name. In the way a hiring manager rewrote her job descriptions. In the way silence, once weaponized, became something else entirely. A choice no longer made. It had been 3 weeks since the storm. Helios Systems, now basking in the glow of newly polished ethics, had shifted its tone. Emails from their communications team now began with, "We're listening," and their website proudly displayed a rotating banner of inclusion pledges and leadership bios with new faces. The world had moved on quickly, as it often does when the headlines fade. But Darren hadn't. He wasn't angry. That was the strange part. He had been angry once, years ago, when his mother stood outside a library in Atlanta, holding a card that said she belonged inside, and a clerk who insisted she didn't. That day had built something inside him, not fire, but something quieter, a kind of stillness that didn't erupt but expanded, like breath held too long. This morning, as he approached the Helios lobby again, he carried no folder, no printed agenda, not even a coffee in hand. Just his presence. The security guard smiled, not with obligation but with recognition. No badge needed, no clipboard check. Inside, the lobby had changed, not dramatically, but meaningfully. Where once stood Brooke in her singular gatekeeping presence, now stood a trio of receptionists, young, old, brown, white, somewhere in between. One of them, a South Asian woman with silver hoops and a soft coral sweater, looked up as he entered and offered a smile so natural it didn't feel trained. It felt human. "Welcome to Helios," she said. "Mr. Wells, it's good to see you again." He nodded, not out of habit, but out of acknowledgement. He walked past the marble counters and paused, not for any particular reason. Just instinct. There. By the place where he'd once been told he didn't exist in the system. He stopped. He didn't reach for a camera or for a line to deliver. He didn't scan the room for who was watching. He simply looked at the floor where his shoes had once hesitated, where his dignity had been questioned in silence. He let the silence return, but this time, it wasn't hollow. It felt full of what had been fought for. He closed his eyes briefly. Not in prayer, not even in reflection, but in release. When he opened them, the world hadn't changed much. The sun still filtered through the windows in angled beams. Phones still rang softly in the background. The printer down the hall still hummed. But something inside him had moved. On his way out, his phone buzzed with a meeting confirmation. He ignored it for a moment and opened his notepad instead. His fingers hovered, then typed slowly. "They thought I came to do business. I came to see if dignity was still accepted at the front desk." He posted it without a hashtag. No tags, no applause asked for. Just a line, left in the open. By noon, it was shared by executives, interns, activists, and parents. A professor at Howard read it aloud to her students. A graphic designer in Austin turned it into a poster. It was projected, weeks later, on a screen at a human rights symposium in Chicago. But Darren didn't go. He stayed home that evening, made himself tea, and sat in the quiet of his living room as the sun stretched across the rug. He thought of his mother again, her back straight, her eyes soft, the way she always said the sharpest truths in the quietest voice. And he wondered if she would have smiled reading what he wrote. He thought she might have nodded instead. Because for people like her, and people like him, sometimes a nod said more than any shout. She didn't storm the room. She didn't slam her credentials on the desk. She just stood, calm and certain, until the silence had nowhere left to hide. Sometimes, dignity doesn't need to fight. It just needs to be seen. And maybe the real question isn't who gets welcomed, but who we've been silently turning away, all along. If this story stirred something in you, a quiet memory, a question left unanswered, subscribe to Undercover Truths to walk with us through more stories that don't shout, but still echo. Thank you for watching.